Welcome to episode 212 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Canadian writer Jason Filiatrault. He wrote the indie film Entanglement, and we talked through the process of how he got that film produced, as well as how he got his start in the entertainment business, all while living up in Canada. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 212. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I'll teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Once again, if you'd like to get this free guide, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing Canadian writer Jason Filiatrault. Here is the interview. Welcome, Jason, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I'm from Calgary, Canada, and I grew up there. And I got interested primarily just through being a weird kid who wanted to do something. It wasn't really a thing or an industry that was that vibrant in my city, but I was into writing, and it seemed like a good way to go about it. So I kind of chased after it for a while until I caught a little bit of a tail, anyway.
Okay, and so what were some of those sort of practical steps that you took to make this into an actual career?
Definitely, so I did a 2-year program for sort of film studies at my local college, and then it was a lot of chasing down local production companies, working as a PA, doing office PA work, going out, different location shoots and stopping traffic, and then eventually, always telling people I was interested in writing, and then just always, at the end of the day, going home and writing and making sure I had stuff to show people. So it was mostly just perseverance, and then kind of being, trying to be the guy that people that I knew thought of when they thought of who do I know as a screenwriter.
Yeah, and so maybe you can describe some of that to our listeners about sort of an appropriate way as a production assistant. How can you approach, the director or the producer on set and introduce yourself and get them to know that you're a writer without coming across as, being annoying or hassling them?
As a PA, that's on set, that's hard. Do your job for sure. You're not there. You're not, if people are paying for your time, for sure, don't use that money that they're giving you to then try to sell them. That's a little ridiculous. And any job you do, try to be good at that job while you're doing it. For me, it was being in the office and just building up a rapport. It was a small production company. It was, we were doing commercials and music videos and corporate stuff then. It was a company that was looking to move towards doing more dramatic stuff. So for sure, for me, it was just, the advantage of it being a small company. There were, at most 3 or 4 of us in the office, filing tapes and stuff like that. So it was that kind of a thing. And then also just being an easy person to talk to an extent, and being open to talking about their stories. Everybody has a story to tell. So for me, it's always a question of being interested in what people's stories are, and producers and directors, they have stories they want to tell. They have their favorite directors. They have their favorite films that they, would love to do something like that. So for me, it was like finding people who had that same sensibility, and then working with them when I could.
And so what would you say was sort of your first break as a screenwriter? Was there a particular script that you got optioned and then got produced? What was that? What did that first break look like?
There was a feature script I wrote 6-7 years ago that was accepted into a program in Canada here called the Canadian Film Centre Telefilm Comedy Exchange, which is kind of an accelerator program for comedy scripts, and they kind of the Canadian Film Centre is a really fantastic resource up here for supporting and educating filmmakers, and their mandate was kind of like looking for the best Canadian comedy scripts to try and encourage development on those projects. So getting into that was for sure like putting a good spotlight on some work of mine, and then also a web series I did with the same producer that I started out with called Bunny Hug that we made up here in Canada. Like looking back on it, it's gorgeous and the performances are great, but the writing for my part was a little bit amateurish, but there's a very weird sounding but. However, it definitely sort of showed what kind of a writer I was, which got me a little bit of notice, and sort of so from those two things, I kind of got my agent and built a bit of a career in Canada doing that stuff.
Perfect. So let's dig into your latest film, Entanglement. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or log on. What is this film all about?
Entanglement is a very dramatic comedy about a young man who is depressed with his life, who learns that his parents had almost adopted a daughter before he was born and then changed their mind. So he decides to track down his nearly adopted sister just to find out if his life would have been any better if he'd grown up with her. And then he awkwardly falls in love with her. That's the short pitch of it.
Yeah, perfect. And so where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this story?
It came kind of from two places. For me, the first was wanting to sort of undertake a kind of deconstruction of the whole manic pixie dream girl trope and sort of seeing how far down the road I could take that before it crashed into a wall. And then the other side of it was learning that my parents had tried to adopt a child before I was born, and then kind of becoming a little bit obsessed about the idea of these missed connections and how there is somebody out there in the world who was nearly my sibling, and they don't know it, and I don't know who they are, but for one brief moment, there was a chance when the planets could have aligned so that we grew up together, and that seemed like a very strange concept to me, and something inherently dramatic in the idea that there are people in our orbit all around us who, by any change of fate, would have not been part of our lives, and how that affects who we are, and the idea that if you get too obsessed with those thoughts, they can kind of destroy you also. So those two sort of ideas came together in a nice way, and that I'd been looking for something to do on one subject, and this other one came along. So it was a bit of a collision of two ideas I wanted to do, and they kind of came together all right.
Okay, perfect. So let's dig into your writing process. I always like to just ask, how much time do you spend outlining versus how much time do you spend actually in final draft writing the script?
I spend a lot more time outlining now than I used to, for sure. I used to, spend, a week just sort of like doing out a beat sheet and like making sure I had the stronger hits and turns clear in my mind before I went to page. But now I'll spend maybe, if possible, a good 3 weeks just sort of living in an outline stage. And I won't do like a traditional outline per se. I won't do 10-12 pages of it, but what I will do is sort of like open up a Word document and just start writing the story to myself, almost in a letter. I'll just start telling myself the story, and anytime I come up against a wall or I start finding myself drifting away from the point, I'll stop and I'll say, okay, tell me the story again, and I'll start over again. And then each time I'm getting a little bit farther through in that story, and I'm picking up beats from the end and moving things around a little bit in the telling. And because I write alone, it gives me that feeling of sort of bouncing ideas off people and working with, it's almost just as if I'm working with myself in the past a little bit. So that document then starts to become my outline. And then I'll take those sort of more prosy, versions of that and start to sort of work out the actual mechanics of constructing a script. And I'm really big on structure, especially in the outlining phase. Like I definitely want to know the flagpoles I'm moving towards each time, and I want to know, what beats I'm trying to hit hard. And I do it a lot more now just because I've done it enough without, and I think we've all sort of had those scripts where we've gotten 65 pages down the line and we're realizing that we're either running out of steam or we didn't know what we were getting into, or it doesn't end where we thought it ended. And the farther along I get, the less time I want to waste sort of throwing away 60 pages of a script. I want to know where I'm going, and you can do all of that in the outline. You don't have to, wait for the actual screenplay to get that going.
Yeah. So you said you spend about 3 weeks on the outline. How much time then do you spend actually writing the script once you have this fairly detailed outline? That
differs, entirely. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 2. I would say, I try not to spend more than 3 months at a time on any single feature. While also, you can do things concurrently. So if I'm outlining on one thing, I'm just sketching out beats for something else. If I'm drafting on something, I can, I'm maybe breaking an idea for a series or something like that. Like, always keeping something else going on the burner, just because I find if I get against a wall on something, it's good for my mind just to shift gears and try to do something that's a little outside the zone while my subconscious is kind of ticking over on the problem.
Yeah. What does your writing schedule look like? Do you write in the morning? Do you write in the evenings? Do you write, middle of the night? And where do you typically write? Do you have a home office? Do you go out to a coffee shop? What does that look like?
I have a home office. I can't really write. The idea of people moving around me or, God forbid, reading what I'm writing is paralyzing to me. So I write at home in various locations wherever I find myself sitting. Time-wise, it depends on what's going on. Like I'm working in a room right now writing, so my time for my own stuff is very limited, 2 evenings, or if at all. If I'm just sort of on my own schedule day to day, I try to write. I try to do something for 6 hours during the day. I try to get up at a reasonable hour and then do some kind of work. And it doesn't have to be writing out the gate. It can be outlining. It can be just thinking up ideas. But I think for me, what's more important is that when I feel like writing, do it. For me, it's about, I can do all sorts of work that helps a script go forward any time of day, but when the time comes when I'm like, oh, I need to write, I have to be able to just do that right then and there. Usually that's an evening thing, when things have been kicking around my head all day. But then, I've also, written in the morning, so I can't say it's a particularly an idea.
What does your development process look like? And we can talk specifically about Entanglement just to be real specific. So then you have a first draft. How do you know that it's ready to show to other people? And what does that look like? Do you have a few trusted friends? Do you have an agent, a manager? You send it to them, you get notes. How does that process work for you?
I for sure, I try to send everything to my agent just so they know what I'm working on. What they choose to read or care about is entirely up to them. Again, my feeling with agents is that they're there to help me sell the things I create. They're not going to, they're there to do their job, and my job is to keep writing regardless. But most of my development process it generally works like this. I will write something, I will send it to a few producers or directors that I know and trust, usually before it's ready, just because I'm way too excited about the concept that I finished something, which is very exciting. So, but I'm also thinking in terms of while I'm writing it, I generally have an idea of who I know who would be good for it. From a producer and a director standpoint, at least from a Canadian viewpoint, I know of most of the kind of people up in Canada that I would get along with or would want to work with on an industry level. And I mean, we're all pretty friendly up here, so I could probably reach out to people and at least gauge their interest in a thing. Mm-hmm. So during the writing, I'm already thinking about sort of who I would think would do a good job with a script, and then reaching, all it is for me afterwards is sort of reaching out to those people and just seeing if there's any interest. And everybody has different things they want to do and different projects that they have going. So not everybody is going to have the time to read or the inclination to. So it's not like a personal thing. It's just like, do you have time, and does this feel like something that fits in with your world? And it's a lot of like just trying to get feedback from people whose taste I trust, and not so much about like, are they really big in the industry or do they make a lot of things? But like, do I think they like the things that I want to write? Is a far more important question for me when I'm sending people work, just looking for notes and thoughts and stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to dig into something you said. There's sort of I would say a misconception from a lot of new writers that kind of feel like, oh, once I get an agent, it's smooth sailing. And it's interesting hearing you talk where you kind of just say, well, sometimes my agent doesn't even read my stuff, and that frankly doesn't even seem to bother you, and you're then sending the stuff out to producers. Is there a frustration with the relationship you have with agents where you have something that you really believe in, and maybe they're just sort of lukewarm and won't send it out to their contacts? How do you navigate that? And maybe just give us sort of your perspective on agents in general.
I mean, I love my agent. My agent is fantastic. And when I say I don't know if they're reading everything, it's like I don't know when they're reading it. I don't know. Like, the point for me is more like they're reading it or not is not the most important part of their job. The most important job is the agency stuff, and if I'm going to be good as a screenwriter, my job is the writing part. As far as as far as the idea of like, oh, if you get an agent, you've got it made, like that's and I had that sort of misconception too. And then what I sort of realized, sort of going forward, is like, how is it, like, you can only make bricks if you got clay, and like you got to bring some stuff to your agent. You have to be out there making contacts. Like, my perfect world is like people who I've already sold on the idea of me are calling my agent to negotiate deals. That's how it should work for me. I don't, if the only thing keeping my career going is that somebody else is out there selling me to people, then that's not me being a good writer or a good business person. Like, my job is to go out there, make the connections, show my work around, that whole part of the job of I won't say marketing yourself, but of just making yourself open and talking to people about your work. Like, that's a big part of the job, as it should be for anybody. So for me, my relationship with my agent is far more comfortable for me, in the sense like I want to write scripts, and then I want to work with them to find the best people to help me make those scripts. And that's kind of the relationship I want. I want, to be driving that as much, myself. I don't think a writer wants an agent who is out there just sort of throwing them at things willy-nilly. Like, you kind of want somebody who gets what you want to do and who lets you lead that a little bit. And the way you can lead that, I think, as a writer, is by working hard at like going out and meeting the kind of people you want to work with, and I think wherever you are too, whatever city. Like, I still live in Calgary. It's not like this is a thing you can only do in one place.
Yeah. So let's go a step further here. So now you're done with the screenplay for Entanglement. Let's just talk through some real specific steps that you took to actually get this movie made. Did you have this, as you're writing the script, you were thinking about what producers? Did you reach out to those producers? Maybe just talk us through that process of how it went from spec script to actual produced script.
in writing it, I was sending it to a couple directors that I knew. One was a director who I sort of came up working with a little bit, who had since moved to Toronto, and another was a director in Vancouver that I'd met sort of through some other people and had a good relationship with, but we hadn't really worked together. And I was sort of just getting notes from them, but Jason James, who actually ended up directing and producing the film, really liked the material, and he really grew attached to it. So kind of from the gate, he'd just finished his first feature. We got along very well. Judging on, the material and stuff, you kind of know, at least in a Canadian market, like, what the budget of this film is when you're done writing it. You know the scale of production you're looking at, so you already know based on that sort of what kind of directors and producers can handle that level of a production. This isn't a big budget thing, so you're open to more ideas. And Jason was the right voice for this film, so that was an easy thing. And sort of having seen his film, we decided to work together pretty early on. So the development process on that was me sending it to a few people that I thought would dig it, finding the people that liked it the most, and then trying to work with them. Like, that was the process. From there, it was, there's the more sort of money aspects. If we submitted to a program, to a development program here in Canada with a TV broadcast channel called Movie Central, who were looking to sort of get in on a more ground floor level with developing projects. So, and they came on board with some development financing and some broadcast licensing. So there's the producery aspects of actually putting together the budget of a film, which, in America, I honestly don't know how it happens. In Canada, it's a very different beast. Mm-hmm. That is a lot of weirder machinations than I can quite fathom. But for me, like, development is always about trying to find the people that I think are going to like it the most, and sort of bring something new to it that I don't have. It's like getting the option feels good, but if it's an option with the wrong person, it's going to start feeling bad really quickly.
Yeah, that's sound advice. So how can people see Entanglement? Do you know what the release schedule is like?
So Entanglement is being released on February 9th, theatrically in limited cities. I think the limited number is 15, and on VOD and iTunes on the same day. So people can see it on February 9th, probably anywhere they are in America. Perfect. On some level. I hope they see it in theaters. If you have the chance, it's a lot more. It's great on it's awesome on a phone, of course, but it's a lot more fun in a theater.
Yeah, for sure. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Are you on Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing? I can round up, put in the show notes, but you can give us that now so people can just learn more about you.
I mean, they can check in on what I'm having for lunch on my Twitter, which is @Filiatrault, which is my name, which I'm not even going to spell it because it's ridiculous. But
yeah, no worries.
They can find me there, you can stalk me in all sorts of ways from there. That's a good starting point if you really want to get weird.
Perfect. So, Jason, I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this film.
Oh, thanks, Ashley. It's nice talking with you.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend. which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase it as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the new SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. This is a new service, but we've already gotten some producers into the system looking for screenplays, so this is another great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. And as a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same email blast service that I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service that I sell on the website. Again, it's a great way to get your script out to producers who are looking for material. So if you get a recommend, you get both bonuses, and if you get a consider, you get the first bonus. I'm also getting ready to start next month a monthly newsletter of all the scripts that got a recommend or consider, and those will go out to all the producers, directly to the producers who are using SYS Select. So 3 potential bonuses if you do use our analysis service. So if you want a professional evaluation on your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director Brian Taylor. He just did a Nicolas Cage movie called Mom and Dad. We talk about the film as well as how he got his start in the business. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's our show for the week. Thank you for listening.